Welcome. It's another late August night here in Texas, and it's extremely humid. Very humid. We are back here at Caddo Lake. It's about 10 o'clock at night. I started thinking about this image a couple of nights ago. There is right now we are on the lake in a section that's really considered to be the river, and you probably can't see that behind me. And at this point I'm guessing, I don't know, 120 yards across, something like that. And again, once you get to the other side, it's not really land, it's just trees and then more open water behind that. It's very swampy, not so much here at the river but throughout the lake. And if you look up Caddo Lake, there's a few iconic locations that you'll see, and we're at one of those. There's an old abandoned building across the river from where we are right now, and it's not occupied anymore. Obviously it's abandoned. It's called the Tea Room. That's another story altogether. A great story, you should look it up. But we are here at the Tea Room, and I've seen countless pictures of the Tea Room, so I thought I would try something different. I don't know that I've seen it shot at night. So as you can tell, there is a lot of unnatural light here. There are light poles, there are floodlights. This is kind of a little marina area, so there are all kinds of things out here. On top of that, tonight's a full moon, and it's just to my left here, and it's shooting straight down the river. So we have all those things. It could not be a worse night for this, but we're gonna try it, see what it looks like. And if it doesn't work, then yeah, still not a bad night. So I've taken a couple of test shots, and the little microscopic bloodsuckers are out. I've taken a couple of test shots, and I was using the wide lens, a wide zoom that was a 16 to 35. I went all the way into 35, and even at 35, the amount of side light that you're getting from the moon and the humidity and the moisture in the air, it just created a huge haze from this side. It didn't really work, so I put on a 24 to 70, and I really went all the way out to 70, and decided I was going to get originally some space above the big tall cypress trees, maybe get a few night sky shots in there with it, but because of the amount of haze and light that's in the air, that just wasn't working. So we've come in a little tighter. It was a little bit difficult to focus. You were constantly having to wipe the lens because of the humidity, and so as soon as you'd wipe it, you'd get back there and you'd think, okay, well, I've got it, and you can't see anything. So, but eventually I think we were able to get focused in. So the composition's a lot tighter than I had originally planned on, but that's okay. Tonight's we're just playing and having some fun with it. And so we're gonna send the drone up, and since I'm by myself, I don't want long exposures. Well, I don't want terribly long exposures because of all this artificial light. It'll reach its way to the 120 or so yards across the river, and I found that anything over about 10 seconds starts to get really changed by the artificial light. I'm shooting at 1600 ISO f5. So I think 8 seconds is about as far as I want to go. And since again it's me, and if the drone goes down, well, I'm not going in. So I'm going to try to watch the drone, and I'm going to use an intervalometer and set it for every 8 seconds. 1 second turnaround, and just let it go. And I'll assemble it later in the computer, but that way I'm getting consistent 8-second shots. I'll move the drone slow, so we'll see what happens. I hate to say that was easy, because I don't know what it's going to look like at the end. It's not exactly what I was hoping for because of the amount of humidity and the amount of moonlight that we have tonight, but still a fun shot. I'm not sure exactly how many shots I've got. I'm thinking it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20, somewhere around there. And I just let it go while I was moving the drone. I did kind of keep the drone up high. At one point I did move the drone down a little bit lower just to get a little more light on the abandoned building that's affectionately called the tea room. So at this point I think we go back and we start assembling this and see what we've got. I don't know. Should be interesting. Okay, we're back at the computer. And the first thing I want to do is, in my case, and again, everybody has their own method, but in my case, the first thing I do is import all the images I shot into Lightroom. From there, I can kind of decide which ones I want to keep, that type of thing. As it turns out, there are 16, I believe, images that I'm going to keep and then assemble in Photoshop in just a moment. But really the first thing I do is once I get those imported is do a basic correction on all the images. At this point I've already picked the white balance that I'm using within camera when it was shot, so I don't even have to adjust the white balance at this point. But if you didn't, this would be the time to do that. So really all I'm doing is bumping the exposure up just a little bit. I just don't want anything to go off the bottom edge of that histogram on the left hand side, and it's barely off the edge currently, so I'm just bumping it up just slightly to get it off the edge to give me a little more visual to work with. Another thing I like to do, especially in this case where you've got such contrast, is I'll bring down those highlights some, sometimes bring up the shadows. In this case I don't think the shadows make a big difference, but I bring down those highlights to better balance what we're looking at and cut down a little bit of that contrast. That works better than just adjusting the contrast. Once I do that, we'll get everything adjusted the way I want, and I export all of those individual files as TIFFs, and I put them in a separate folder just so that I can have them for later if I need them. You can actually skip that step. That's just me. I just want those little guys in a folder, so if I have to reference them I can. From there, if you wanted to skip that step, you can just select all of the images that we've edited here that's going to be part of this image, and we can open all those up as layers in Photoshop. So it'll take all of those images, open them up together in Photoshop, and put them in one file, just multiple layers. And since we were shooting on a tripod and the tripod never moved, in which, by the way, what we didn't show you in the previous part of the video was how close the feet of the tripod were to either the holes in the pier or the edge of the pier. So it was a little unnerving just to make sure that you didn't knock anything off into the water. So for me, I determined which one of my layers I want to be my base layer. And since there was one shot where I lowered the drone to change the light direction on the building itself. I chose that to kind of be my base layer because I liked the way the building and what was immediately around the building was lit. I like the shadows. However, since I did lower the drone into the frame of the shot, you can see at the top of the picture where you have that light streak from the drone. So to get rid of that, since we're going to be using what's called a lighten mode on all our different layers, it just looks for the lightest parts of each picture. I'm just going to get a black brush and just wipe out that particular streak from the drone. On this one still image it looks terrible, but what's going to end up happening is we add other layers that have light on those trees behind where the drone was, so you won't ever see that. So from there we want to make sure we add a layer mask on each layer. In this case we're using a white mask, so everything is revealed on every layer. Once you do that, you go down and you disable each layer except for the base layer, the one that this particular image that I want to start with. And since that's my base layer, I want to put it at the bottom. Again, there's always a million ways to do this. This is just how I did this image. Once I get all the images stacked, they're disabled, they all have a layer mask. I leave my base image on, and from there I turn on one layer at a time. The next image, the next layer above my base layer, I'll turn the next layer on to reveal what it adds to the composition, what kind of light it adds. And since again at the very top we want the lighten mode on all these layers, so it's just adding in the light portion, the part that's lit up of each image. So I go through and determine which parts of that layer that I want. If there's sections that I don't want, then I can take the black brush and then just on that layer paint out what I don't want to have contributed from that layer. Once I've gone through all the layers and added them and added what portions of each photograph and each layer that I want to use, I end up with pretty much our composition. And you can always, like we used black to hide things, you can always use the white brush to reveal those things, since it's very non-destructive. Once everything's put together, you end up with your final image. I did take this back into Lightroom as a flattened image and just give myself a little bit of a vignette around the edges, just to bring attention to that building in the center. Hope you enjoyed it, and just a reminder, we are starting our podcast on September 13th, where we're going from park to park, all kinds of parks, and visiting with other people. The podcast is entitled Photography, Parks, and People. It's available on iTunes and Spotify, and we hope you join us. It begins again on September 13th, and we try to get those out each Monday following that. So we hope to see you there. Hope you enjoyed this. Thanks a lot for watching.